So we're talking about the ADHD tax, right? So what is the ADHD tax? And this is, I don't think I've done a call on this. I've been doing this for 2 years now, and I don't think we've done a call on the ADHD tax. So it's always fun to do a new topic because I know we've had people with us for over 2 years, which is really cool. Thank you so much for being here. So the ADHD tax is what that does. It refers to the financial, emotional, time, and opportunity costs that can be created by ADHD traits that may not be our favorite, right? So it's not some catastrophic mistake that we make. It's more of like lots of little like small things over time. And sometimes it can be invisible until years later. It can cost us a lot of money, a lot of time. Like it could be late fees. It could be missed opportunities, forgotten subscriptions. Anybody do that where you get a subscription, you forget about it? I just canceled a bunch. And when you do the math and you finally do it, it's like, oh my gosh, I've been paying $40 a month for this website that I started but didn't finish building and decided I want to do something else, but I didn't want to lose the work I did on the website. So I was paying $40 for WordPress, and then you go back in and realize it's been a year. So that's what, 40 times 12 months, what, $480, right? Impulse purchases, maybe some procrastination penalties or late fees, burnout cycles, right? So the ADHD tax is kind of can be a lot of different facets, and it's kind of a byproduct of some of our executive function or our memory stuff, things like that. So what we're going to talk about today is what are some examples of the ADHD tax. So you may not know some of these are in your life, and then what you can do about it, right? How to solve that, what to put in place so you're not paying as much of an ADHD tax per se, right? It's not necessarily an official term, but it is a pretty common term that we've used. So before I start with this is what I want to say, because when we look at stuff we've missed or subscriptions or things like that, that doesn't feel great. What I want to remind you is the word taxes, there's only a tax on something if it's an asset, right? There's a tax if you own it typically. So you're not going to pay a tax on your vehicle like I just got in the mail. If you're getting, I'm in North Carolina, we just got our I've got to renew and pay the taxes. I wouldn't have to pay taxes on a car if I didn't have a car, right? You're not going to pay taxes on a house or land if you don't own a house or land, right? You're not going to pay taxes if you don't make any income at all. You're actually going to get a refund. So when that's probably what's really important to me before we get into this, is to understand that if you are paying certain ADHD taxes, understand that your brain really is an asset, especially as an entrepreneur. And so when those things happen, remind yourself how incredible your brain is, how many gifts you have, and why it's wired to the point where people with ADHD are 500% more likely to be entrepreneurs because of how our brain is wired. So yes, we're paying a tax sometimes because of some traits, parts of our brain, but then we also have this asset that can do really well, that can make a lot of money, create, invent things, wonderful things, right? And so remind yourself that your brain really is an asset, and the world is not necessarily built for an ADHD brain, because technically we're the minority. It's 3 to 8% of the population. So the world is not going to be built for an ADHD brain. It's just not. They've got to build it for the majority. And so we want to offset some of that ADHD tax and that cost for you. And that's what we're going to talk about today. The first thing we want to do when we look at ADHD tax to offset that is we want to look at how is that showing up? What are some of the ADHD taxes, right? So let's look at that. So there's 4 ADHD taxes. One is the money tax. So that's going to be lost dollars, right? That's like me, Tyler, who couldn't decide on the website and was paying $40 a month for WordPress, right? That's a money tax. Time tax. So lost hours. We may not gauge things well. Our time blindness might come into play. So we might lose time, not doing things more efficiently. Energy tax, we might have burnout and exhaustion, right? So there's the energy tax. And then the opportunity tax, we might miss growth, we might miss income, we might miss opportunities or things that we would have gone to, but we forgot to do something else, we couldn't, right? So those are the kind of the core 4 ADHD taxes that we're going to talk about how to prevent more loss. So money, time, energy, and opportunity. So the money tax. So here are some examples of that. So one is late fees, right? Anybody have that, or overdrafts, interest charges, forgotten bills, parking tickets, tax penalties, things like that. If you, I'm just, so it's normalized because, I'm an ADHD coach. I've been in real estate for 15 years. I've coached people with ADHD now for over 8 years. I mean, ADHD entrepreneurs, right? I've done, now we're getting closer to 11,000 calls, 11,000 one-on-one calls. And I want to tell you some of the, like, I'm not perfect, right? I still will get some of this. And I just remind myself again how much my brain is an asset. But one in particular is I've done a lot of traveling, and I was touring and speaking. And I'll tell you, those, when you're traveling and you go into, there's like a toll, but it takes your license plate and you have to go back and remember to go to the website to pay that. You know what I'm talking about? Somebody traveled cross country where it's like a fast pass, or they just take a license plate and you have to write down the website. Oh my goodness. So I'll tell you, sometimes if you don't pay it, it goes away. It does go away. Or you're like, oh my gosh, and there's like a bunch of fees, right? So that's one that I've experienced, which is kind of not ideal, but it happens, right? And you just have to laugh and, pay it when you figure it out. Interest charges sometimes can happen. Like if you take out a credit card that has 0% interest, if you pay it off by a certain time, and you totally could and you forgot, and it's like, oh my gosh, so that's something that's happened to me as well. Forgotten bills. You think you paid it and there was $5 left, and now there's like $100 late fees on there. So these are some of the financial costs that can happen. And again, it's easy to have shame about that or feel like something's wrong with you. And it's so important to just, again, remind yourself, it's like an ADHD tax. It's something we have to pay sometimes. And what can we do about it? So subscriptions, this is a big one. If you do this, right, sometimes there's a free trial. I'm just going to tell you right off the bat, sign up and cancel right away, or don't sign up for the subscription. That's what I would say. You can always go back and redo it. But it's harder to remember by a certain date, or put a notice in your calendar and make sure you do it. And there are so many things our brain is thinking about. The lie that a lot of us tell ourselves is, well, I'll remember to do that. I've got 7 days to watch this free trial on HBO, right? Or to try this thing, and just err on the side of caution that you probably won't remember, and do some self-care now and cancel it ahead of time, right after you sign up, so you don't forget about it. The Amazon tax. This is kind of funny. I went in some nuances, but anybody just go on Amazon and like sometimes buy stuff. You might have emotional spending, dopamine. You might be collecting hobbies, right? So we're more likely to do hobbies or art projects or courses or things because we can get really excited. We're really curious about stuff. And so you may have a rule with yourself that it sits in the cart for 24 hours before you buy it. You might have something like that. Or if you have Amazon Prime, a lot of times you can return it. So that's one that people have mentioned a lot as well. And then the other thing is course collector, education. We are constantly curious, which is why, right, the smartest man to ever live, Albert Einstein, historians very strongly think he had ADHD as well as autism and dyslexia. So we're constantly curious, and anybody love courses, love learning, love education, taking trainings, classes, books, you name it, right? So you may have a rule with yourself in there that if you buy it, you have to start it within a certain amount of time, right? So some of these rules are helpful that you can have in place depending on that versus just collecting them. So you may have a course or a book that you were excited to read that you haven't touched. So make a rule, you start it with a certain amount of time, and if you drop it, you sell it, you resell it, you bring it back to Amazon, whatever that is. But you can have these like little kind of rules with yourself that can offset some of this as well. So DIY, is anybody, if you're going to do it yourself and then you get stuck, right? If you're going to do a vegetable garden, anybody done that? It's like, oh, $400 later and I have 3 tomatoes. So before you take on a big project, because remember, our brain sometimes can minimize the amount of time something takes, and we have trouble gauging what that's going to involve. If you're choosing to do something yourself versus hire it out, just again, take a pause and make sure that's the best ROI for you, and sit with it. Because a lot of this stuff can be prevented by like a 24-hour sitting with it rule before you buy something. that can be really helpful as well. There's, delegation avoidance. So that's something else that we can have as an ADHD entrepreneur because of perfectionism, because of control, fear of explaining, training, it's boring, fear of spending, whatever. So we can kind of keep ourselves stuck as an employee and not be as much of like an owner or an entrepreneur. And so thinking about, do I have to do this? What if it could be done 85% good enough? Right? If somebody else could do it 85% good enough, can I let go of it? Versus it's got to be 100%, it's got to be perfect, or I don't want to do it. So that can help with the delegation avoidance is, if somebody did 85% good enough versus it not getting done, versus you staying up late at night, working long hours, things like that. Tax return tax. So if you want to, you don't have to. Is anybody here who has filed their taxes late? Anybody done that? Okay, I have. I'll admit it. So we're paying a tax on that, right? And yet we have a year to prepare to file our taxes, right? And so something as simple as, I know some people will trick themselves and pretend their taxes are due earlier, right? Or pretend you have to be there half an hour than when you really have to. You tell yourself it starts earlier. That's a trick as well, right? So there's little stuff we can do. Again, these are all kind of little tricks and mind games that we play with ourselves to offset the ADHD tax. But it does happen every year. And chances are, if you just sat down and did it, it wouldn't take that long to get it finished, right? If you did that. So you could do a hyper focus session. If taxes are coming up and you leave it till last minute, okay, take a Monday and it's 4 hours and you don't get up till it's done, and you get some coffee or blast some music and have a reward at the end. So there's little things, I think, that if we just pause and think about how to help ourselves versus shame ourselves, because that's what a lot of times we do. We shame ourselves, we beat ourselves up instead of thinking solutions or what the resistance is or what the discomfort is. So yeah, the tax return, that can happen as well. The time tax. So time blindness. So again, like I said, we can sometimes have difficulty perceiving time, how long it's been, how long something's going to take. So we underestimate projects. We can overcommit to things, right? Because we think we can get it done. We might miss deadlines, and then there's an extra fee, chronic lateness, those kinds of things. So with time blindness, so the thing that I've seen work the best for clients, for my coaching clients, is to double the amount of time you think it's going to take to finish it, right? So if you're taking on, let's say, designing your brand, well, it's going to take double the amount of time you think. I mean, if it's a brand, honestly, it might take triple the amount of time. Or if it's like answering emails, or if it's doing something. So double the amount of time you think it's going to take getting ready to go somewhere. That can take double the amount of time. Because you get in the car, and if you're like me, oh man, I forgot my headphones, right? So you run and get the headphones, and I don't have water with me. I don't want to pay for water, so let me run inside. I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot my gym shoes. That's our working memory that can do that. So double the amount of time you think it's going to take. Almost like the gauge is a little bit broken, and so you're just giving yourself a buffer, because really not rushing and stressing is almost an act of self-care. I mean, how nice is it to get in the car and not be stressed about traffic? So some of this is really like an act of self-care as well. And then projects, think that they're going to take double the amount of time that they would take. So before you commit to something, look at what you have on your plate and say, if all of this, if I had double the amount I have already, could I still say yes to this? And if the answer is no, don't say yes, right? Could you do double what you have on your plate already? If you can't, don't say yes to something else. So also decision fatigue. This was actually something that came up a couple of times on my one-on-one coaching calls today. So decision fatigue. So we can struggle with prioritization, task selection. We can spend hours, lose hours deciding what to do, choosing between this option and this option, right? Things like that. And we can get just paralyzed on even who to call for lead generation. What do I say? What time should I call? What script should I use? Should I use Facebook Messenger? Should I call them? Should I text them? All of those things. So decision fatigue and decision paralysis is a huge thing. And the underlying thing that I've seen a lot, the core behind that is a lot of times perfectionism, right? It's got to be perfect. So when we're deciding between the best lead gen source, it might be what's going to have the higher ROI because I don't want to waste my time, right? and what script is going to work the best. And then we spend all this time trying to figure out the perfect plan when we could have done something that was good enough, and now it's too late to do it, right? Or you could have just chosen something. So the number one thing that I see work for decision paralysis is what's called the 85% good enough rule. And some of this is building your tolerance to anxiety and kind of self-soothing. But if you have three choices and at least one of them is 85% good enough, like that newsletter you're going to send out or that email is 85% good enough, send it and then sit with the anxiety and practice self-soothing. Because some of that perfectionism is if I figure out what the best thing is, that's going to calm the anxiety. And I'm avoiding feeling the discomfort of it not being 100%. Right. So it's actually sometimes an emotion regulation issue, not because you have to choose the perfect thing. And the perfectionism can be a deep down, like deep seated thing from having to heavily mask as a kid. Right. We're trying to overcompensate because you've heard me talk about this. A kid with ADHD, studies show, is going to get 20,000 more negative messages about themselves and their behavior by the time they're 8 years old, right? So you're automatically going to think, what's wrong with me? Why am I getting criticized? Why am I being reprimanded more than all of my peers? Why am I hearing all of these things that aren't great about me and all of these critiques? So it's of course we're going to be perfectionists because one, like if we have rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which is like fear of rejection on steroids, and it literally hurts to be critiqued, we're going to do anything in our brain to not get critiqued. So perfectionism is a coping mechanism to protect yourself from emotional pain and dysregulation and depression and all of those things, right? So we want to be like with this paralysis, being conscientious and aware and compassionate with that perfectionist side versus like, oh, suck it up, what's wrong with you? Like that's not the route. This is a coping mechanism that helped protect us for a long time. So and I have a mental health background too, if you can't tell, but that's really, we want to honor that and go for the 85% good enough when you're feeling stuck on a decision. And then you're going to self-soothe that anxious part that's like, oh my gosh, it's got to be 100% or something bad's going to happen. Right? Something bad's going to happen. I'm going to get critiqued. I'm going to lose people. I'm going to be abandoned. Like whatever comes up, that's going to be the core of it, of healing that and kind of sitting with that and building your tolerance and that muscle. And that's going to be, a really big asset. So again, if it's 85% good enough, go with it and then deal with the anxiety so you're not so stuck. That's decision fatigue. The starting task, right? Task initiation is difficult for us. A lot of times it's harder for us to get started. Anybody here, once you get started, then you're good. Once you get started, then you're okay, or it gets easier, right? Remember, our dopamine's on a delay. The way that dopamine is regulated in our brain, a lot of times we don't get the dopamine until we start, whereas a non-ADHD person, essentially how, I'm just going to show you really quick because I think this is really, really important. I want to show you how it's regulated in the brain really fast. Because this is going to make a lot more sense. Okay, here we go. So real quick thing on the neuroscience of motivation, right? So when there is a task that we want to do, whether it's external or internal, the brain sends these blue arrows. This is the neural pathway of dopamine, right? So when there's a task we want to do, the brain sends dopamine to the prefrontal cortex, that front part of the brain. And when there's a surplus, and dopamine is the happy chemical, it's like the motivation, the gas, right? When there's a surplus, the brain says, ooh, I want more of this, right? That's what a lot of us are chasing. If you start this task, I'm going to give you more. This is a non-ADHD brain, right? You get a surplus and the brain says, hey, non-ADHD person, start this task and I'm going to give you more. And then keep going and I'm going to give you more. And then when you finish, I'm going to give you more for completing it. And then you're going to feel great, right? So this is the neuroscience in general of a non-ADHD brain. Whereas an ADHD brain, what happens is a lot of times we don't get a surplus. The brain's kind of finicky with the dopamine, so we only have a little bit, and that's why it feels impossible to start, even though it's a simple task, even though you want to do it, it doesn't make sense. But unless it's dopamine producing, unless it's interesting or passionate or challenging or the last minute or urgent, the brain just doesn't quite light up in the same way. So we're operating with just like a limited amount of gas, right? It's like I'm in Asheville, North Carolina. If I want to drive to the capital, Raleigh, North Carolina, and I want to drive there. It's 4 hours away, but I only have enough gas to like get out of town. I'm not going to be able to drive to Raleigh, right? Unless someone puts more gas in. And dopamine is really the gas. So we beat ourselves up when we don't even have enough fuel. So of course we're not going to drive 4 hours, right? It's not going to work. So a lot of times we have to just white knuckle it to start, or turn on music, create dopamine, body double, set a deadline, a timer, like all those tricks to get enough dopamine. Once we start, the brain's like, oh, sorry, here, I forgot, I was taking a nap, like here's more. So a lot of times the task initiation is harder for us. So I just want you to know it's not because you're lazy. It's not because you don't care. You're apathetic. You're a procrastinator. No, like a lot of times there's a delay on your dopamine, and reminding yourself, once I get started, then the dopamine's going to come and it's going to get easier. And just reminding that mantra over and over again can sometimes bypass that. Like, well, I need to get motivated. Right? I need to get motivated. Let me sit on my phone for an hour and see if something can trigger dopamine inside of me to start. It's like, oh, hey, buddy, it's on a delay. Start for 5 minutes. And if you still hate it, you can stop, So that's just a quick snippet of how the dopamine works, which it's fascinating, isn't it? It's kind of wild. So that's the starting task. And then again, the perfectionism task, we kind of covered that a little bit, but just like over polishing low value tasks, making it perfect when really like that email or that presentation or that social media post would have been good enough. You're not going to get an extra client by editing that sentence over and over again, right? It might just be that the post happened, the reel got out there and people saw your face. It's not because you had the perfect script or the perfect title. So again, we're going for 85% good enough is going to be part of the key to that. So the missed follow-up revenue. So this is another one. It kind of ties into that perfectionism or the executive function is, a lot of sales happen with the follow-up, if you haven't heard that. So maybe it's not that initial contact, but it's checking in with them every 3 months, right? And doing that. And so sometimes we can skip that. And that can come especially from the rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Like, oh, I don't know if they want to hear from me. I might be rejected. It might not be good enough. Maybe they're angry at me because I took too long. Like that can happen as well. So again, I think, just addressing whatever the pain point is. I would say with follow-up, with lead gen, anything like that, really sitting with it and seeing where the resistance point is. Like, where is the resistance? What is the pain point that you're wanting to avoid? That's where the solution is. It's not in shaming yourself, punishing yourself, right? And you've heard me say this before. If shame and punishment worked, it would have worked by now. So if you're not doing consistent follow-up, if you're not doing consistent lead gen, and you keep beating yourself up, why are you doing the same play? Why are you trying the same, coping skill if it's not working? If you've beaten yourself up and you've shamed yourself into submission, and you're still not where you want to be, wouldn't it make sense to try something else and be curious, for a week? So that's what I would say is be curious, see where the pain point is. Maybe you don't want that script because it doesn't sound like you. Okay, don't use it. Maybe voice to voice is really triggering for you, and text is better. Something, shoot them a text and say, hey, I've been thinking about you, and let that be it, versus it having to be this like very prepared phone call that's perfect and you don't make it at all and they never hear from you, So those are just some of those things, right? And we talked about waiting for motivation. Those are some of the things as well. Let's talk about some of the stuff that you can do to reduce your ADHD tax. So again, I'll say this over and over again. The goal is not perfection. You are not a robot, right? You are an imperfect, messy human, and that's beautiful. You're beautiful in your imperfection. Like, that's what makes us great, right? I don't want to be, do you want to arrive where there's nothing left to learn? Like, how boring would that be? No, I never want to arrive because I'm always wanting to learn. So remember, the goal is not to be perfect. The goal is to be authentic, and it's for it to be 85% good enough. 85% good enough. So that's one thing to reduce that ADHD task. Don't go for perfect, go for good enough. Automation beats willpower. So this is big. If you have bills, set them on an auto draft, right? Savings, set it on where it's automatic. Follow-up, set up good enough email drips or even texts that are simple where you can do that. Scheduling, automate that, put in your calendar right away. Don't rely on your memory. which brings me to externalizing everything, right? So use calendars, whether it's Google Calendar or paper calendar, whatever, but don't trust your memory because you're taxing your brain, and we want to free that up for other stuff. So set reminders, set timers, do checklists, get systems, have a virtual assistant that's, not that expensive. It might be $5 or $6 an hour. It might be $10 an hour, but have somebody remind you. But try to externalize a lot of this stuff instead of pushing yourself to do it and then not doing it and beating yourself up. That's not fair. Build dopamine into success. So have things that are visible for you. Have a visible checklist. Have a marker board. You might have like a jar. I know somebody, one of my clients with lead gen, he would take the amount of he had like their little marbles and their amount of contacts he had to make for the week. And he had 2 big jars. And every time he made a contact, he'd move it into the other jar. So he saw the dopamine reward of the marbles moving to the jar so he could see completion, right? I have another client that does sticky notes, right? When they do a task, they get to crumple it up and throw it in a basketball hoop. So build in some external dopamine and make it fun as well. Simplify decisions. So get templates if you can. Use scripts that feel authentic to you. Have standard operating procedures. If you know that your decision paralysis gets worse towards the end of the week, on Monday, maybe decide who you're going to call, or maybe the night before you're in that situation too. Again, we want to make that easier. So simplify decisions for yourself. Delegate earlier, let go of control earlier if you can, if it's the right person. What is my highest dollar activity? Ask yourself that. And then make things harder for yourself that you don't want to do. So delete the shopping apps off your phone, right? Instead of relying on impulse control, which ours can be weaker, delete the apps, delete Target off your phone or Amazon or whatever, and maybe only access it on your desktop. So you can't do it in an impulse. Or unsubscribe from marketing emails from stores you're going to buy money from, or different companies. Turn off notifications on your phone if you love Taco John's, Taco Bell. Taco John's is a Midwest thing, but Taco Bell, and then they have a coupon, or we've got this new thing, right? And you're like, oh shoot, I need to do that. So again, we want to set ourselves up for success instead of depending on willpower in the moment. This is one I do. Like, I'm one that can stay up and play video games or watch TV or whatever, but I always have my Wi-Fi on a timer. And so it's going to shut off whenever that is. And sometimes I put duct tape over the top so I can't even go switch it without ripping the tape off. So make it difficult for yourself to do habits that you know are not good for you. And then again, progress over perfection. So even if you reduce the ADHD tax by 20%, not 100%, but just you experience it 20% less, or you save 20% more on subscriptions that you canceled, right? That's a win. So we really want to celebrate wins, and we just want to offset some of the ADHD tax because remember, we would not have a tax on something if it wasn't an asset. So your brain is built differently. It's really special. And so just remind yourself again, and you can play the oops game. That's what I do. If I miss something, it's like, oh man, I forgot to cancel this. It's been a year. It's like, oops. Okay, what do I learn? What can I put in place to offset that next time and let me move forward? And that's going to get you way farther than shame is going to get you. So that is the ADHD tax. Thank you so much for being here. That's the ADHD tax. Be compassionate with yourself. Have empathy. Remember, shame. If shame worked, it would have worked by now. So instead, be curious. And remember, your brain is an asset and you got to pay taxes sometimes, and that's okay. So, all right. Have a wonderful Tuesday. Thank you for being here, everybody. Love y'all, and we'll see you next time.